Greetings metalheads and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George and today I have another instalment of bands you need to hear for you. Another recommendation of a band that if you're not familiar with these guys, you really need to check them out because you're missing out on some seriously high quality metal. So today's recommendation actually falls very comfortably within the death metal or brutal death metal subgenre. And it occurred to me, actually, prior to doing this review, that I don't really talk about a huge amount of death metal on this channel. Odd bits and pieces here and there, but I feel like it's one of the subgenres that maybe I can represent a little bit more. So, taking a look through my collection, and one of the bands from that kind of the brutal end, or the more extreme end of the death metal spectrum, that I come back to quite regularly, I think they really do stand out, is a band from Spain, and they are entitled Apostles of Perversion, which is a very interesting name, and it's quite a good name, and they are a very good band, in fact. I would say definitely a death metal band. Some people would label them or tag them as a brutal death metal band. I tend to just think of them as more of a death metal band. So as I say, Apostles of Perversion, they've been around since the early 2000s. I think they were formed in around 2002 from Spain. They have only actually got 2 full-length albums to their credit so far. This is the debut album. This is entitled Revenge Beyond the Grave. This was released in 2016. So it's been around for a few years, but what I would say is that it sounds pretty solid. There is nothing particularly, it's more old school in stylism than it is in sound. It's not a terrible production or anything like that. And then we've got Scars of a Sick Mind, which is the second album, and this was released in 2019. Again, we've got some great artwork on both of these albums. I think they're really cool. Very sick stuff. Just looking at that, you know this is going to be blasphemous death metal. So, Apostles of Perversion. Now, I would say that if you're not familiar with these guys, they will definitely appease the tastes of anyone that's a fan of Cannibal Corpse. If you're a fan of Nile or Sinister, maybe a bit of Suffocation, that's the kind of the span of death metal that I'm talking about. Definitely a heavy leaning towards Cannibal Corpse sound and style. More the sort of the mid era is what I'm picking up more, less so the early Chris Barnes era, more kind of kill or torture, that kind of period of the band. And again, there's certain parts, elements that kind of remind me of Nile as well, the ancient Egyptian themed, more technical death metal band. Overall, I would say that Apostles of Perversion do have quite a complexity, but it's not really technical. I wouldn't say that it's progressive death metal or technical death metal or anything like that. I would say that it's just quite intricate, but you get plenty of great rhythms. It's all about the colossal, thick, chugging riffs, and these albums have those in spades, absolutely. Also vocally, I think that the vocal leaning is definitely more towards Corpse Grinder Fisher, George Corpse Grinder Fisher, in his sound and style. The vocals performed by The Impaler. Interesting stage name. A good vocalist though. Definitely very strongly influenced by Corpse Grinder Fisher. That is very much apparent, but a really good solid vocal performance. Doesn't sound like a Cookie Monster, nor does he sound like trying to rip off Chris Barnes or trying to rip off Frank Mullins, for example. Quite, you can see the influences or hear the influences, but quite unique. So this is the debut album, as I say, Revenge from Beyond the Grave. Both of these albums, what I really like about them is that they're quite short. They're about 25, somewhere between 25 to about 28 minutes. So somewhere in that sort of bracket. Can't quite remember the exact figures off the top of my head, but they're quite short, they're quite sweet, but they're really good. So this debut album, it consists of 8 tracks. We've got a pretty brutal opening track, Revenge Beyond the Grave, which is the title track. Really solid. As I say, it's solid death metal. It is at the more brutal end of the spectrum, but it's all about those massive, crunchy riffs. We've got Shoot 'Em All, which is very interesting. We've got the very blasphemous "Blessed Are the Raped Children," which is a bit kind of disturbing, but what I do appreciate about this band is that although they are extreme, of course, there are some lyrical contents and titles that are a bit more on the risky, tongue-in-cheek end of the spectrum, but they also kind of keep true to the not taking yourself too seriously, and it being, really quite twisted and sick sort of death metal, with tracks like "Blood on the Road," for example, or "Thrown in a Garbage Can," which are good songs. They are just enjoyable, brutal death metal tracks, but they're a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's not the sort of thing that you can take really, really seriously, and I would not recommend taking this sort of stuff really, really seriously. All those tracks I mentioned, really good. It's just a really solid start-to-finish death metal album. Very much, if you like albums like Torture from Cannibal Corpse or Kill, if you like earlier albums from Nile, like Black Seeds of Vengeance or Amongst the Catacombs, those are great sort of reference points, really. Just really solid. Great vocal work, really crunchy riffs, prominent bass tone, and the drumming is faultless and pretty crammed with blast beats. So that's the debut. Then we've got Scars of a Sick Mind, second album from 2019, as I mentioned. Absolutely love that artwork. I think that is so evil. That's so menacing. Creepy as hell. Again, a short but sweet album. Some particular standouts from this one. We've got A Gaze into the Abyss of Insanity. Great title. The Enemy Within, which absolutely smacks of pure Cannibal Corpse. Scars of a Sick Mind as well. Corpses in the Cruel Space. Again, very Cannibal Corpse, but some great vocal work and some great, I'm not going to say like sing-along choruses for death metal, because that's just, you don't really tend to get sing-along choruses, but it's certainly memorable and it's catchy. Then we've got The Hand That Pulls the Strings, another great one. Eaten Alive from the Inside, and the very aggressive closing track, Pile of Shit. Poetic, that's the word. A brilliant album, really good. As I say, again, full of great riffs. If you like really decent headbang-worthy chugging riffs, prominent bass tones, plenty of blast beats, plenty of savagery. There's no real slow doomy moments on either of these albums or from this band, but it's just pummeling death metal in the good old vein. But production-wise, it sounds really good. So it doesn't really sound like they're just trying to emulate the Morris Sound Studios sort of sound, or the Sunlight Studios. They're not trying to replicate these old school death metal studio sounds. No, they're going with something a little bit more up to date, I think, here. So there we have it, Apostles of Perversion. Mentioned numerous times there, if you like Cannibal Corpse, you're definitely going to like these guys. I think also if you like bands like Aborted, definitely going to find something here that you enjoy. So they've only got the 2 albums at the minute, but I thought it was a good band to pick because I believe they do have another new single out at the moment, and they're currently working on a new studio album. So get yourself acquainted with these short but sweet, pummeling death metal albums before the release of the new album, which will no doubt absolutely smash. So, anyone else a fan of Apostles of Perversion? Not necessarily the most well-known band around, but certainly a killer, crushing band, and absolutely do check them out. You will not regret it. Tracks that I personally recommend from Revenge from Beyond the Grave, I would say check out that title track. I would say Shoot 'Em All. I would say Portrait of a Serial Killer. That's another good one. Then we've got Gore Whore as well, which is a particularly enjoyable, gritty death metal track. That's just oozing with that good old school Cannibal Corpse style. And from Scars of a Sick Mind, definitely The Enemy Within, definitely Corpses in the Cruel Space, and The Hand That Pulls the Strings. Definite highlights for me. So check it out and let me know what you think. Very interested to hear thoughts and opinions on Apostles of Perversion. Thanks very much for watching, my friends. Do feel free to like and subscribe. As always, it's very much appreciated. Take care, and above all, stay heavy.